Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health TV and Radio Show. I'm your host, Sara Banta. I'm a health coach, natural supplement expert, and a busy mom of three. Make sure you hit the subscribe button below so you're notified every week with my new podcasts on Mondays and Tuesdays. And if you haven't already, join my free group coaching on Telegram with the link below. There is no downside. I teach you on a daily basis with tips and tools to enhance your health, and you will be a part of an awesome like-minded group to support you on your journey in addition to truly taking control of your health. My goal is to reach everyone on earth with eyes to see and ears to hear my message of healing. So please help me with that goal. Share this podcast with a few of your friends who may need my help. Well, I am super excited to have Kiran Krishnan back again. He's a research microbiologist and has been involved in the dietary supplement and nutritional market for the past 17 years. Welcome back, Kiran.
Thank you so much for having me, Sara. It's great to be back.
Well, you know what? There's just not enough time with you. And everyone seems to be the gut expert, but you are my gut expert. So you are my go-to. And that's why I'm super excited to have you back on. And your supplements have changed my life. I think I've told everyone, if anyone knows me, they know my rock bottom was essentially gut related. And it's been a long journey, and a lot of steps got me about 80% there, but there was this last missing piece, and your products got me to that 100%. So super grateful for all the work you've done, and so excited to have you on back. And you also have healed my family. Everyone in my family, 3 kids, husband, me, all very different gut profiles, health profiles, different issues. And they're all feeling better because of you. And that brings me to the point where we have 5 very different health profiles. Mm-hmm. And when you heal the gut, all of these other symptoms go away. And that's why today I really wanted to dive into the basic routine and protocol of the supplements that I take daily and that I feel most people would benefit from. And obviously there's some little intricate things that you have to do outside of that, but that's what my goal is today, considering the gut is connected to almost every disease. And last time, if anyone's missed our last talk, we talked about leaky gut and we touched on the gut-brain axis. So definitely go back and listen to that. And we are also in an environment where most children and adults are suffering from some sort of anxiety and depression, and no one thinks that it's connected to the gut, right? So that's another big aspect of what we'll talk about today. So I want to talk first. I heard you talk about the fact that everyone was after blaming things on their genes and the Human Genome Project, right? And let's just say, oh, well, I'm going to have breast cancer because my mom did. I'm going to chop off my breasts. And then, there's that mentality where it's more about the genes or your microbiome. And what is the microbiome versus the microbiota?
Yeah. And first of all, thank you so much for the trust in the products and the brand for you to take them and put your family on them and all that. That means a lot. And that's really the root and core reason why Microbiome Labs and the brands and my work exist. It's really to give people the opportunity to really thrive and experience a healthy life overall with some resilience, where you don't have to be absolutely perfect in your choices to do well. and be healthy. And all of it goes down to root cause, which is what we're gonna really touch on today. But to address your first question, which is an important one, because the terms are often conflated, people kind of use them interchangeably, right? So the microbiome is really the totality of microbes and all of their genetic elements as it relates to the host. So when we're talking about the human microbiome, we're really talking about all of these organisms that exist in many different parts of your body and all of their genetic elements. Normally, when we're talking about the microbiota, we're talking about a specific ecosystem in a given part of the body, right? So in the gut, we often refer to it as the gut microbiome, where you're basically talking about the totality of microbes, their genetic elements, which includes viruses, bacteria, fungi, and so on. But if you're talking about the gut microbiota, then you're talking specifically about the gut ecosystem. And even then, you can get very specific as to the microbiota of the stomach, for example, versus the small intestine versus the terminal end of the small intestine or any given part of the large intestine. They all have different microbiotas. The same thing with the skin has a different microbiota than your respiratory tract versus the vaginal canal and the brain. Everything has a different microbiota. The collective is a microbiome. So if we get into the gut, we should often be referring to it as the gut microbiota rather than the microbiome to be most accurate.
Okay, so that was something that was new to me when I heard you talk about it. And we talked a lot about leaky gut last time, but when I really listened to you more and more, it seems like leaky gut leads to IBS, leads to SIBO, leads to IBD, leads to GERD. They're all connected. So with that, I wanted to talk about the supplements and how they heal the gut and then heal all of these other issues. And the number one fundamental one, which I would think that you would agree to start with, is the MegaSpore, how it works with the MegaMucosa, the MegaPre, and then when you would add in the Mega IgG and the ZenBiome and the HU58. And I know everybody, I just named off a whole bunch of supplements, but that's why we're going to break it down. And I want to make sure we go through it. And when are those appropriate for people? When is it too much or unnecessary? And when is it mandatory? I mean, right now our food supply is under threat. I saw a statistic in the amount of farmland that Bill Gates owns now, and all of these big food companies that are buying out the small, natural, good companies that we've all depended on. Things like that are happening more and more. So we just don't know when those threats are going to hit our gut.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right in that our microbiome and the totality of microbes, and then our microbiota and our gut specifically, are constantly under assault, right? And it almost it doesn't matter completely what you eat, because so much of what we consume is cross-contaminated with things like Roundup and chlorine-based solutions and antimicrobials and so on. You're better off, of course, moving towards organic and farm, co-op raised and so on. That can improve your outcomes and reduce the amount of exposure to things, but inevitably you will still gain exposure to all kinds of chemistries out there, right? So there's something like, and I've heard a number of examples, but the average human is in contact with somewhere around 80,000 different chemicals on a regular basis, most of which have not even been tested on the human system, right? And I just posted on my stories on Instagram a story from Jolene from Dr. Brighton on how there's a significant increased risk of ovarian cancer among hairstylists, right? And that's because, and it's like significantly different than any other population. And that's likely due to all the chemicals that they're exposed to on a regular basis, just doing their job, right? The coloring and the straightening and all of these things that we put on ourselves, because most of those things simply have not been tested on the human system, and certainly have not been tested on the human microbiome or the human immune system, right? So we really don't understand how most of the chemistries we encounter on a regular basis impact our system. So we do have to protect our system very diligently, right? And so that's how we set out when we started thinking about probiotics and what we needed to build from a therapeutic perspective. All the products you mentioned we promise will connect all the dots for people and make it make sense to them. But it's important to know the overarching message here is that all of them have a very specific fit in a process of pathology that dismantles because of our lifestyle, right? So we went through last time the details of leaky gut and how that dismantles step by step. It always starts off with the microbes themselves, right? So it used to be, one of the reasons why this even exists is because when I first started looking into this holistic health and wellness space, I would hear people going, oh, glutamine, you need tons of glutamine to heal leaky gut. You need aloe to heal leaky gut. You need this and that other, compound to heal leaky gut, when none of those compounds address the very first thing that happens when you start the process of leaky gut. And that's the dysbiosis. That's the shifting of the microbes in the gut. Right? So you lose diversity in the gut microbiome and you lose your keystone species. And as a result, you get an overgrowth of dysfunctional and potentially pathogenic organisms. Those are the features, the first things that happen when you start the process of leaky gut, which means that you have to fix those things first, right? It's really hard to fix downstream issues, right, when you don't fix the source. It's the analogy I like to use is like, imagine you're going down a river in a boat and you've got holes in the boat, and so the water is filling into the boat. You're slowly sinking. You can't make it to your destination. So your solution is to pail out as much water as you can as fast as you can, right? You're not really going to make progress because the holes are still there and you're not addressing the root cause, right? So that happens too much even in the holistic health space, because people don't quite understand what the root causes are. So when you think about it that way and you go, okay, the microbes and their dysfunction occurs first, and then the physiology starts to fall apart because you don't have the right microbes maintaining the physiology. Right? Now, this is another theme in the human body that's really important for people to understand. We talked about microbiotas, which are the specific ecosystems of different parts of your body, right? The microbiota of that part of the body dictates how that organ system functions, right? For example, the skin, right? The way your skin functions as a barrier, to prevent things from going in, to prevent moisture from coming out, to sample the environment, to convey information to the immune system about the environment. All of those things, they're dictated by the microbes that live on your skin. The moment you start to get dysbiosis on your skin microbiome, the skin no longer functions the way it's supposed to. You start losing the barrier function, you start losing ceramide function, you lose a lot more moisture, your skin starts to dry out and thin, the barrier of preventing things from coming in starts to dismantle, the immune response in the skin gets dismantled, all because the microbes on that part of your skin are off. Right? Same thing with your small bowel, your large bowel, your upper respiratory tract, everywhere in your body. There's a very close relationship between the microbes in that region and the function of those organs. And if the microbes get dismantled, the organ no longer functions the way it should. Right? So that's a very important theme for people to think about. And that's why in most cases of dysfunction in the body, it's the microbiome or the microbiota that's the root cause. And that's why you have to look at that first, right? So hopefully that example made sense to people. So now let's talk about leaky gut and the process in which we were thinking about this. So we understood that the first thing that happens is the microbes get dismantled. You start to get lower diversity, low keystone species, high levels of pathogenic organisms. How do you fix that, right? What do you do when the microbes become disarrayed and you don't have the right balance anymore? Well, the allopathic answer for that in many cases is blow it up with an antibiotic, right? It's like an atom bomb. Hey, there's too many bad microbes. Let's kill them all. Of course, we know that doesn't work because you kill the good microbes just so long as you do with the bad microbes, right? So it doesn't mean you're shifting anything. You're just bombarding the area and then you don't know what's going to come back up, right? Now, then the natural medicine world went, we don't believe in antibiotics. We don't write those scripts. We're going to use antimicrobials instead, right? It's the same concept, right? You're just using a natural antimicrobial instead of a synthetic antibiotic. But it's the same concept. It's about bombarding that space, trying to kill things, but you kill everything, right? So we said there's got to be a different approach. Nothing controls microbes better than other microbes, right? And nothing that we can create can better identify the presence and the growth of dysfunctional microbes than other microbes. Now, the reason is because microbes do something amazing called quorum sensing. There are certain microbes that have the ability of reading other microbes' signatures, chemical signatures, and figuring out who's there and in what level, and how do we get rid of them, right? So that's why we honed in on these Bacillus endospores, who are very powerful quorum sensing bacteria, and they're also very powerful competitive exclusion bacteria, right? So remember, quorum sensing is a microbe's ability to talk to one another and read each other's signatures. Competitive exclusion is the ability of a microbe to eliminate another microbe by competing against it, right? Bacillus is very unique in that it does both really, really well. So we started looking at studies where Bacillus was used as a competitive exclusion agent. And as it turns out, in 1952, a drug was put out on the market, a probiotic prescription drug called Enterogermina, which is still on the market today, still used for treating dysentery and other gut infections instead of an antibiotic. This was released in France and in Germany in 1952. The product is still on the market today. Doctors are still writing prescriptions for it for gut infections. Why was it so useful? Well, because it's a probiotic bacteria that can read the chemical signature of a dysentery pathogen, find the location of that pathogen, sit next to it, and eliminate that pathogen without harming anything else, right? It's an absolute beautiful, elegant biological solution. So we said, well, that's really the solution, and let's start identifying bacillus microbes that are natural to the human gut. So these are commensal species, so they know what the gut microbiome is supposed to look like, or the microbiota. If we put those back in, we hypothesize that they will find dysfunctional microbes, bring them down, and at the same time, they will increase the beneficial microbes as well by producing compounds that feed the beneficial microbes. Sure enough, we did that. We published our first leaky gut study in 2017. Since then, we've published a number of studies that show that these Bacillus endospores do exactly that, right? They get into the gut, they read the signature of the gut, they find the dysfunctional microbes, they bring their numbers down, and then they increase the number of the good microbes that are too low at too low of a level. So they're reorchestrating the microbiome, and there's nothing else that can do that in the same way, right? So that became the foundational product. Now that is really important for leaky gut, but it's also really important just to exist as a human, because keep in mind, whether you have leaky gut or not, you're on your way to it, right? Because we're constantly bombarded by things that are dismantling our gut microbiome. And the funny thing about it is that one of my philosophies when I'm looking at scientific approaches to things is I always look at evolutionary biology, because I'm trying to understand, if what we're proposing as a therapeutic is that something that has happened in the natural world before, right? Or are we trying to outsmart nature? Because I see too much of that even in the science world, where especially in the medicine world, where we have this hubris that we can outsmart nature, right? Just take breast milk, for example, right? Breast milk is the only mammalian food that has been perfected by evolution, right? Women still today produce breast milk because it's so critically important to babies. Yet companies would have you believe that their formula is better than breast milk, Because why? They reinforce it with DHA and blah, 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 right? They're trying to convince women that they don't need to breastfeed. They just need formula, which is fortified and has this and that and the other. Absolute nonsense. We know that from longitudinal studies that if babies were not breastfed, they have significant health issues compared to babies that were breastfed, right? So that's a hubris where science is trying to outsmart nature and saying we can do better than nature can. And so with that in mind, I'm always looking at, if we're proposing this idea as a probiotic spore, you know, does this happen in nature somewhere? And sure enough, when you look at the evidence, we consume these types of spore-based microbes on a regular basis. If we lived as our ancestors did, lived off the land, ate dirt, drank waters out of rivers and streams, they're ubiquitous in the environment, right? So we're supposed to gain access to these organisms on a regular basis. They go in, we give them a home, they fix the home and clean up the home, we poop them out, that spreads them around and ends up in other communities and other people as well, right? So it's the most natural thing we can do from a probiotic perspective. So that becomes the foundation. That's where everyone has to start. And all we're doing is just reintroducing microbes that you should be naturally exposed to, but inevitably you're not, right? We're just smart enough to understand what nature has already created and utilize it, right? We're not smart enough to outsmart nature. So that's where it starts, and that becomes foundational to everybody.
So that is MegaSpore.
Mm-hmm.
And that supplement is, every single person in my family is on it. I recommend it for all of my clients as just a base. It's that safeguard, just like you're saying. I mean, even in my household where we're all organic, all wild meat, doing the best we can, we're getting threats. We've got the radiation, we've got the other toxins that are in our water and things that are out of our control that are hitting us. And we've never been under so much threat in our lives. Okay, so with the MegaSpore, then there's the MegaPre. And everyone, this tastes delicious. So I have to actually hold myself back from taking too much in a day. And that's one question I had for you is, what's the dose? Can you take too much? And, you know, it does show some calories in it. Does it break a fast? Do the calories feed the bacteria? So I shouldn't really be calling them calories for my own body, because we know that a calorie is not a calorie. But talk about the benefits of this, the dosage, when to take it, and how that fits in.
Yeah, so the MegaPre becomes step number 2, and the reason is it's designed with a number of oligosaccharides, 4 exactly, that specifically feed the keystone species, right? So think about it this way: the MegaSpore comes in, it starts reducing the dysfunctional bacteria, it starts increasing the growth of the beneficial bacteria in your gut, which includes a set of keystone species like Faecalibacter posnitzii, Akkermansia, Bifidolongum, and so on. We need those at higher levels to have resilience and be healthy in general. So those start coming up just from the MegaSpore alone. And as they're coming up, we want to create a selection pressure that improves the growth of those organisms so that they can stabilize their numbers, right? And again, this happens in evolutionary biology because humans tend to be foragers and gatherers and all that. And so they end up eating a lot of resistant starches and oligosaccharides that come from fruits and the inner core vegetables, the fibrous parts of fruits, and so on. And so these oligosaccharides are really critical for feeding these organisms. So with that, you do 1 scoop a day. You can do more than that if you wish. I think beyond 2.5 scoops, there are probably some diminishing return because your gut cannot utilize that level, even if you put it in. So you'll probably defecate out a portion of that. So I go 1, sometimes I go 2 scoops, especially if I've been on vacation and I'm kind of off my regimen of supplementation. I'm trying to get my regularity and all that back. I sometimes go a little bit higher. If I do more than 1 scoop, though, I split that. I do 1 earlier in the day and then 1 at night as well. I normally take it with a meal. So it could break a fast. I would say it's a 50-50. depending on the individual and depending on how much the liver gets involved in processing any of the components. But it shouldn't matter because you should be taking it with your first meal anyway, right? So what I do is I take the MegaPre and the MegaMucosa, which we'll talk about. I mix them together in a shaker bottle, and that's what I'm drinking with my first meal of the day, whether that's in the afternoon, or depending where I am and how I'm fasting, it may be a late morning meal. So the MegaPre becomes really important. Now, I use it every day. I use it with my kids every day because oligosaccharides are so important to maintaining the diversity of your gut microbiome. If people are resistant to taking it every day for whatever reason, do it at least for 3 months and then do it intermittently, right? If you can't take it every day for cost or schedule or whatever it may be, at least do it once or twice a week as a maintenance level, because we have to get oligosaccharides into our system. Remember, I talked about mother's milk earlier. A big component of mother's milk is are up to 200 different oligosaccharide prebiotics. They are the microbiome's first food, and they become the most potent food for the microbiome. So you have to get some in there. And keep in mind, that's not the same as fiber, right? So fiber is a different kind of molecule than an oligosaccharide. An oligosaccharide is a smaller molecule, but much more complex than your normal psyllium fiber or husks and things like that we think of as roughage, right? Oligosaccharides are highly specialized, very complex carbohydrate molecules that feed very specific groups of bacteria in your gut, right? So the more often and the more frequently you could take, the more consistently you could take oligosaccharides, the better off you will be.
Well, I can tell you that when I first started taking the 3 of these products, the MegaMucosa, MegaPre, MegaSpore, then the MegaPre and MegaMucosa were out of stock for a little bit, and I just had the MegaSpore. I felt a difference. There was okay, my bloat didn't come totally back, but it was there a little more than when I had all 3 products. And then as soon as I got them back in stock, it went right back. And I've had that feedback from a lot of people as well. I know you mentioned a study when you combine the MegaPre and the MegaSpore as far as weight loss goes. And I didn't want to dive too much to that because I wanted to save that for another time, but maybe you can just touch on the study with just those 2 products for weight loss, because everybody is complaining about unexplained weight gain right now.
Yeah. And there's a post-pandemic issue with weight gain as well, because a lot of people's microbiomes just got screwed up.
Right.
We thought about it as like, well, we're eating worse and we're less moving around. That is clearly a factor. But the thing that really has driven metabolic dysfunction in people post-pandemic is a disruption to the microbiome, right? For lots of reasons. That's also correlative with the stress, the increased stress and anxiety that people are feeling. In fact, anxiety, weight gain, metabolic distress all kind of go together, right? They're all like type 3 diabetes is what people call it. So a long time ago, and without going too deep into it, because we should do a whole episode on this, but I had this idea of what I call metabolic reprogramming. And the idea is that when you look at individuals that never struggle with weight, almost no matter what they eat, right? We used to always say they have a high metabolism. That's not actually true. They actually have a type of microbiome that negates weight gain and maintains a healthy metabolism. And so my thinking was, can you take someone that struggles with weight, reprogram their microbiome without even diet and exercise involved, just tweaking the microbiome, and then that results in weight loss and improvement in metabolism. That's what we set out to prove, and we published that study at the end of last year, where we combined the prebiotic and the probiotic in overweight individuals. These are individuals of BMI of 30. For 12 weeks, we instructed them specifically, no diet, no exercise, don't change anything that they're doing. It was a double-blind placebo control, so they didn't know if they were getting the product or placebo. What we found is in the treatment group, we saw a 35% reduction in visceral fat mass, right? 35% with no exercise, no diet changes. 35%. And we saw about 6 or 7 other biomarkers associated with improve glucose control, insulin sensitivity, and all that improving quite a bit. Inflammatory markers improving quite a bit. And very excitingly, we did an RNA blast analysis. What that means is we were looking at all these genes that got turned on in these individuals that weren't previously turned on at their baseline. And what we found is that after this 12 weeks of reprogramming their metabolism, they had about 25 new genes that are all associated with improved metabolism, fat burning, glucose control, and all that. All of those genes were on in these individuals, right? They previously were not on. So we are changing the epigenetics, and that gave us a clue that we are reprogramming these individuals' metabolism by shifting the microbiome. As I mentioned, any organ system that exists in your body, if the correct microbes aren't present and the microbes shift, then the way the organ function changes as well, right? And this is absolutely true in your large bowel. Your large bowel is a big part of your metabolic health. It controls things like satiety, fat burning, all of these things. There's receptors all in there. We'll go through those details in the next episode. We'll talk about how you reprogram your metabolism. But we basically showed that if you switch the microbes in the large bowel and switch what they're producing and what they're doing, you can absolutely change your metabolism without the effort of the exercise and diet. Now, absolutely, you should be dieting, and what I hate the word diet, you should be eating clean, right, which shouldn't be a diet. That should just be the normal eating, and you should be exercising, right? If in those subjects we added in clean eating, a change to their regular diet, and some moderate exercise, they would have just lost tremendous amount of body fat along with the visceral fat and so on. So it was really exciting to see, and I think it proved a point. And it's something that, I watch all the time. Between that and fasting, to me, you become kind of resistant to weight gain.
Right. And most of my customers know that I'm into intermittent fasting, and I have a protocol of supplements that help kick you into ketosis, the accelerated keto. And then that makes it easy. So then the gut can start healing with these products, and the products, the results just get enhanced. So what you're saying also makes sense, because when we are under stress and our body's under stress and our gut is ripped up and we get leaky gut, we go into survival mode, right? And that survival mode shifts us into a lower metabolic rate, reverse T3 versus free T3 with our thyroid. We have a bigger propensity to store fat. We have all of this cascade of things that are happening. So if you fix the microbiome, these guys down here have brains, and they're going, oh, well, we're not in survival mode anymore. Let's start burning fat. Let's reduce insulin resistance. And oh, by the way, when we reduce insulin resistance, I now have energy to get off the couch. And even though Kiran's not telling me to go exercise, I might go for a walk when I wouldn't before. So there's this cascade and improvement in overall lifestyle when you just take these few little steps, and then you feel like, okay, now I can do this. So super excited to get into that in more detail next time. But okay, so we now have the MegaMucosa. This also tastes very good. So I heard you mention, and I want to hear you talk about all of the benefits of this, but that this also can help with constipation. I know that so many people are suffering from constipation. Very few people have the opposite problem, but what are the benefits of MegaMucosa? Where does it fit into the daily lifestyle, and how does it help with constipation?
Yeah, and so for those that remember from the last episode, we talked extensively about that mucosal lining, right? And if you haven't heard that last episode yet, you should go back and listen to it, because that understanding the mucosal lining becomes absolutely critical to your overall health. So in your digestive tract, in your intestines, you've got this thick mucosal lining. It's thinner in the small intestine, but in the large intestine, it's quite thick. And that's where the majority of the microbes in your gut live. And then that's also where a lot of the communication occurs between the immune system and your microbes. That's also a physical barrier to preventing things from leaking through your gut, i.e. leaky gut, and then entering into circulation, right? So the mucosal layer is absolutely critical. In fact, there's lots and lots of studies showing mucosal dysfunction at the root of many chronic illnesses, right? So when that mucosal layer gets thin, that becomes a huge issue over time for your metabolism, immune system, and everything else. The reason it becomes thin is also important to note. That goes back to the original cause, which is the dysbiosis of the microbes, right? Because one of the things that occurs when you start losing diversity of microbes, losing these keystone species, and increasing potentially pathogenic organisms, you get a lot of organisms that eat away at the mucin layer versus stimulating the rebuilding of the mucin layer. So over time, you start reducing the thickness of that mucin layer. We recognize this as a key pathology that occurs in leaky gut. And we said we need to put something together that specifically helps rebuild the mucin layer. So there's really 4 main components in the MegaMucosa that do that. Number one, it's 4 key amino acids. Now, why did we pick those amino acids like leucine and so on? It's because the mucus layer is built of what we call glycoproteins. Glycoproteins are amino acids with a sugar attached to it, right? Those 4 amino acids are the building blocks of the mucin layer. So even if you're stimulating the building of the mucin layer, but you're not getting enough of those amino acids in your diet, you can't rebuild the mucin layer. And the mucin layer is constantly being rebuilt and cleaned up and being produced from the bottom up, and the top layer sloughs off and you defecate it, just like your skin. Your skin is constantly building and rebuilding because it's a barrier. That's what your mucin layer is doing. So we want to ensure we're getting enough of those 4 amino acids, because studies show when you add those 4 amino acids, it increases mucin rebuilding by 95%, right? And there were no products on the market that had these 4 amino acids in it, and that just seemed like a huge missing piece to us, to this whole process. The second part are polyphenols. So polyphenols are compounds that come out of colored fruits and vegetables, especially things like cherries, blackberries, blueberries, and so on. These polyphenols are really important for 2 key reasons. One is they are very powerful antioxidants, so they reduce the oxidative damage that's occurring in the lining of the gut, which allows the gut to heal. The second part is that they feed keystone species like Akkermansia muciniphila, and that keystone organism is the organism that's responsible for turning on the rebuilding of the mucosa genes in your system, right? So that organism is the repairman, but he needs his polyphenols in order to proliferate, right? And so the polyphenols help proliferate the repair person of the mucosa. And then the 4 amino acids provide the building blocks of that mucosa. The last component are immunoglobulins, IgG in particular. Now, the reason why the immunoglobulins are in there is because your mucosa traps a lot of toxic elements, including all these toxic elements that your microbes in the mucosa are producing. Things like endotoxins, for example, or mold toxins that are coming in from the inside, or environmental toxins that are coming in with your food. All of those toxins drive an inflammatory response in the mucosa, and that inflammatory response leads to damage and dismantling of the mucosa. So the immunoglobulins go in and bind up all these toxigenic things and neutralize them, thereby reducing that toxigenic load and the inflammatory load in the mucosa, allowing it to heal. One way to think about this is that almost any part of your body can heal on its own given the right condition, right? Even something as simple, if you get a cut on your hand, it'll heal if you just leave it alone. But if every day you're scratching it and rubbing it and irritating it, it's never going to heal, right? And if it does heal, it heals differently than it should. It'll scar and create all this awkward formations. Same thing with the lining of your gut. As long as there's toxins and pro-inflammatory things entering in and residing within your gut, it becomes really hard for your body to heal it. So with that in mind, we said, okay, these immunoglobulins bind up all of these things that create toxicity and inflammation. That then at least puts the gut in the mode to heal. And then you've got the building blocks with the amino acids. You've got the polyphenols feeding the mechanic that repairs it. And then now you've set the condition in which the mucosal lining can be repaired, right? And so your MegaPre is feeding some of these beneficial microbes already and producing the butyrate, which is needed as the fuel to rebuild the structure. So MegaPre is playing a role there. And then, of course, the MegaSpore has brought down the dysfunctional microbes and brought up the functional microbes so that now you have the right microbiome to heal the whole system. Now, to answer your question, why does it help with constipation? Right? So a key aspect of constipation is leaky gut. So there is a junction in your brainstem where your enteric nervous system, which is the nervous system that lines your entire digestive tract, it's connected to your central nervous system, to your brain, through something called the vagus nerve, right? So the vagus nerve sends messages back and forth between the gut and the brain. Now, there's a junction in the brainstem called the dorsal vagal complex. In that junction, there is a key checkpoint where the signals from the brain to the gut to move the bowels, which is the peristaltic activity. That's a muscle contraction that's supposed to occur. Just like any other muscle in your body, the signals come from the brain to the neuromuscular system to move the muscle, right? Same thing is happening in your gut. The signals come from the brain to the gut. That causes the smooth muscle cells in the gut to contract, and your gut and your bowel starts to move. And it contracts and it moves food through. Now, what happens in leaky gut is endotoxins from a dysfunctional gut make their way up the vagus nerve into the brainstem in that dorsal vagal complex and generates an inflammatory response in that part that stops the signals from the brain to the gut that tells it to move. That is likely the most prevalent source of chronic constipation in people, right? It's leaky gut. So if you're doing these things, if you're binding up that endotoxin with the immunoglobulins, you're absolutely going to allow that signal to go through versus negating that signal because of the presence of the endotoxins creating inflammation, right? So that puts the whole system together then for people.
And that makes sense because so many people then have this stress over if they're going to poop. And, there's this feedback loop of stress over it, and then it causes constipation to make it even worse. And that's why you say that when kids or toddlers don't get potty trained on the number 2, but they're able to, urinate in the toilet, that's anal retentive. There's a reason they call it that. So, okay. So to summarize, MegaMucosa, MegaPre with your food together, 1 to 2 scoops is good. And then the MegaSpore 2 caps with your food, with your meal, because that's how it naturally comes in nature, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So we are short. I mean, I can't believe how quickly we go through things, Kiran. Okay, so the Mega IgG and the Zen Biome Dual. And I think this is needed by every single human on earth. And where does this come in? So we want to make sure.
So the Mega IgG is also that immunoglobulin that I mentioned that's in MegaMucosa, right? So in MegaMucosa, you've got about 1 gram of it in there. So it's doing its job. Now, you may need higher levels if you have certain issues. For example, if you're somebody with lots of candida or mold exposure, you might need higher levels of the IgG. So you would add an additional scoop or 2 from the Mega IgG standalone product. If you've had lots of antibiotics in your life, if you're undergoing a gut viral infection like an adenovirus or norovirus or something like that, and you've been experiencing a lot of GI troubles, if you've had toxic exposure to something, right? Whether it's contaminated food or water or whatever it may be, you might have to add more IgG. You can go as high as 5 to 7 grams of the IgG in your daily routine. You don't have to take that level every day forever. The 1 gram is a good maintenance level, but for some individuals, if you have mold toxicity, candida, have had lots of antibiotics, have a lot of sensitivities. So if you're somebody that hardly tolerates any foods, has histamine intolerance, mast cell activation, all of these super sensitivities, you probably need higher levels of the IgG, right? So you can use that product standalone, add extra scoops into your MegaMucosa, MegaPre mix and consume it that way. Jumping into the Zen Biome Dual. So this is a phenomenal, one-of-a-kind product in the world. It's got two strains in it. One is the psychobiotic called Bifidolongum 1714. This is a probiotic that affects the brain and the central nervous system by reducing inflammation in the central nervous system, improving tryptophan metabolism and synthesis into melatonin and serotonin, dramatically reduces stress and the perception of stress, improves mood very significantly, and significantly improves sleep as well. So it's completely changing what's happening in your central nervous system for those that experience anxiety, low mood, early depressive symptoms, lack of sleep, which is 70% of the population right now, right? So then you combine that with the GI issues, which are also gut-brain issues. IBS is the #1 gut issue experienced by Westerners, and IBS is predominantly a gut-brain issue. All the inflammation that occurs in the central nervous system that causes anxiety and depression, that same type of inflammation exists in the enteric nervous system, which causes IBS and spasmodic activity of the bowels and all of the symptoms that we come to find out, right? IBS is not so much a gut primary issue. It's not as much about what you eat and so on. It is a gut-brain issue. It's a neurological issue. So the second strain in that product is called Bifidolongum 35624. It's the most well-studied strain for IBS with over 80 published studies. Now you have both of those. You've got the psychobiotic 1714, you've got the IBS strain 35624. You combine the two of them together, you're absolutely in a global manner modulating the neurological behavior of your system, right? Including bringing down lots of anxiety, improving digestion, allowing you to sleep, changing your mood, and changing brainwave activity, which we have some awesome studies on brainwave activity, helping people get into a low frequency brainwave when they experience a stressor and when life seems a little complicated. The low frequency brainwaves is the brainwave section that you want to tap into to be calm, collected, and be able to get through any stressor. So that ZenBiome Duo is a one-of-a-kind product that it really can help society today.
And not only that, a lot of weight gain is from stressors and increased cortisol. So when you're managing cortisol, as I call it, the dirty cupcake, when you're actually gaining weight and increasing your blood sugar without even enjoying a piece of chocolate, this is going to help with that mechanism in your brain as well. Wow, Kiran, we really did go through all of it in a matter of 50 minutes. I can't believe we did it. I'm super excited to have you back on and dive into more. So thank you so much. Everybody, you can find these supplements all at Accelerated Health Products. You can link through SaraBantaHealth.com if that's easier for you. So thank you, Kiran, and thank you everyone else for joining us. If I can help you with your health issues directly, contact me through the website, SaraBantaHealth.com. Happy to put together a protocol for you, especially with these supplements and how they fit in with any of the cleanses I have, with all of the accelerated health product supplements. They really work synergistically together. Join my free group coaching on Telegram with the link below. There is no downside, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to have comments and questions about what we talked about today, so you can post them in there and learn on a daily basis, and you will be a part of that like-minded group to support you on your journey. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram under Accelerated Health Products, across over 100 channels under Accelerated Health TV and radio show. And like I mentioned before, my goal is truly to reach everyone on earth with eyes to see and ears to hear my message of healing. So help me with that goal. Share this podcast with a few of your friends. That will also help me get more experts like Kiran on my show to help you learn and take your health to another level. Join us every week on Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific and Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific. You can find all the supplements and all of my podcasts at SaraBantaHealth.com. Use coupon WELCOME10 for 10% off site-wide. Thanks again for joining us here, and have a great week.